Good morning. We come together by the light of the chalice flame. If you're joining us from home, we invite you to light a candle or a chalice. We light this flame as a symbol of new life enlightening our way, as a symbol of warmth in every human heart. Let all the lighting of this flame rekindle in us the light of hope, of peace, of love. May we share that light with all people. I'm Beth Belmore, your lay worship leader this morning, and I'm so glad to welcome you today to the Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We are a community focused on support, transformation, life, and love, and we welcome you no matter where you are on your journey. If you are visiting today for the first time, we extend you a special and very warm welcome. Please reach out to any of our staff to find out how to get connected here. By way of regular reminders, the location of the exits are to your left and right and behind you. We also invite you to keep your phones on. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but to tell the world that you are here, but please remember to keep them quiet. One special reminder today is that this is a question box service, which means that Reverend Hannah will answer all the questions that you can ask. The cards to submit questions are just outside the sanctuary doors, so please get them in by the end of the settling song. Now, take a deep breath. Become aware of your body and allow yourself to be fully present to this time together. We're glad that you're here.
Oh, were you expecting an answer? Was that a real question, or was it more of a comment? More of an opportunity to speak your mind, to share your heart? Was that a real question, or was it rhetorical, whatever that really means? Purposefully unanswerable, meant to hang there as an invitation to thought rather than certainty. Were you expecting an answer? Do you really want to know? How open is your mind, your heart? How possible are you feeling this day? How malleable? Or were you expecting confirmation rather than the instigation of your imagination? Were you expecting an answer to your real question? If you insist, I'll begin with context, followed by hedging. Making room for your word allergies and my own aversions too. When the answer comes haltingly into focus, I will have to resist the temptation to keep it fuzzy on purpose to avoid commitment. I will also have to resist the temptation to assert certainty where murkiness runs rampant. So bring your real questions, offered tentatively or boldly. Bring your real questions, expecting an answer, but never the answer. Bring your real questions, the one whose answers put us just a little bit on edge, hungry for more, but more what we're still not sure. Bring your real questions. Here to a place and a people who will hold them tenderly like the precious gifts they are. Come, gathered from the sanctuary, the living room, and everywhere in between, bringing our questions together.
Today, as we focus on the power of questions and answers, we remember that one of the most powerful questions that we can ask as a community that cares for one another is, how can we help? And one of the ways that we can support the ministries of this congregation is to give generously and receive gracefully. If you're ever in need of emotional, spiritual, or financial support, know that we are here for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our ministers, to me, or to Reverend Hannah, to ask for help. Please know that it is a joy, actually a joy, for us to be able to offer support. And if you are feeling stable and able to give, we ask that you do so in that spirit of generosity. There are many ways to give to our fellowship. You can give of your time and your talent, and we especially need financial resources to allow our ministries to thrive for the months and years to come. Feel free to come up to one of our ushers who is standing at the back of the sanctuary, or you can raise your hand to have an usher come to you. And for everyone else, we encourage you to donate online or via our text to give function on a smartphone. Thank you. Your gifts are deeply appreciated. We also share with each other from our hearts as an act of compassion and an act of widening our circles of care beyond our own individual lives. To be held in community like this is a deeply powerful gift, and we invite you to let us know whenever you are in need of being held in this fellowship's embrace. You can reach out to any of us on staff, or you can fill out the form on our website. The options of sharing privately with a minister, asking for support from our care team, or sharing more widely with the wider community are all available to you. This act of sharing our lives with each other allows our joys to feel multiplied and our sorrows divided. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can share in the chat box whatever's on your heart or on your mind, and we'll do our best to follow up with you. We also invite anyone here in the building after the service to take a stone from the bowl of stones at the back of the sanctuary and place it here in our fellowship chalice as a sign of care and connection for each other. You can also join a member of our care team at that same bowl of stones if you're in need of a listening presence after our service. We now turn our attention to the joys and concerns wider than those of this gathered community. We allow our mind and heart to reach out in ever-widening circles outward like the ripples in water. The first of these stones is for our local community and state. We name that yesterday here in Appleton, a man was shot and killed by police during a domestic dispute investigation. We hold all who were involved in our hearts, and we pray for a time when we are able to keep our communities safe without the need for armed officers. As the ripples continue, we add another stone for the United States, and we hold the flooding, heat waves, and other weather crises across the nation affecting communities in so many devastating ways. We lift up the need for ongoing advocacy to reduce the effects of climate change. And finally, we recognize the interconnectedness of all of us beyond borders and oceans, and we add this final stone for the ongoing wars in Ukraine and in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan. These wars have claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and caused untold destruction, and we expand our hearts to hold this pain and to extend a desire for peace. We enfold all who are celebrating and all who are suffering in the embrace of our hearts, and we commit ourselves to actions of compassion and justice in service to those circles beyond our own. May this moment of silence help to make it so.
Our settling song is a wonderful hymn of questions. Where is our holy church? It's 113 in the gray hymnal, and the lyrics are up on the screen. We'll be doing verses 1, 2, and 5. Please stand if you like standing when you sing. It goes like this.
Our reading this morning is a story that comes to us from the folklore traditions in the Middle East. It's been told in many versions, like most folk tales, over the ages, and this one goes like this. Once there was a guard who worked at a border crossing between one country and the next, and every day the border guard stood there trying to discern who was probably smuggling. Right, who was bringing illicit goods across the border. One day, a woman came up to the border crossing. She was leading a donkey with bales of hay on its back. Something in the guard's gut told him that she was up to something. And so, when she came up to him at the border crossing, he said, "What's in those bales of hay?" "Hay," she said. And so he dug in the bales of hay, looking for something. Maybe it would be precious jewels, maybe it would be coins. He knew he would find something. He found nothing. But he said to her as she went on her way, I just know that you're up to something." And usually about once a week, the woman would come to the border crossing with a donkey carrying a bale of hay. And the border guard would say, "What are you smuggling?" And she would say, "Nothing." And he would look through the bales of hay so fastidiously every week, week after week, month after month, And his curiosity started to gnaw at him. He had to know, what was she smuggling? He knew it. He knew it was something. And his searches escalated. He would search inside her water container. He would search in her lunch bag. He searched the hems of her robes. Nothing. He found nothing. And month after month, year after year, it gnawed at him. What was this woman smuggling? He knew. He just knew it was something. He could tell. Eventually, his curiosity unsatisfied, the border guard retired. And he went about his life, but every once in a while it would ping him in his gut. What was that woman smuggling? I know it. I know it. I know she was smuggling something. One day, he was at the market and he saw her without her donkey and bale of hay. And he went up to her and he said, "Look, I'm retired. I couldn't get you in trouble now, even if I wanted to, and I don't want to. I just have to know. I have to know. I have to know. What were you smuggling?" The woman smiled a knowing smile and looked at him and said, "You're right. All along, I was smuggling." And the border guard looked at her and said, What were you smuggling?" "Donkeys."
I'm going to invite up here David and Ian, and we're very happy to present today a jazz ballad by Irving Berlin. It's about 90 years old now, and it's been recorded by everyone: Chet Baker, Miles Davis, Coltrane, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Bette Midler, Eric Clapton. But like all jazz ballads, of course, on the surface it's about love, but this one also asks a lot of unanswerable questions. So that's How Deep is the Ocean by Irving Berlin. How much do I love you? I'll tell you no lie. How deep is the ocean? How high is the sky? How many times a day do I think of you? How many roses are sprinkled with dew? How far would I travel to be where you are? How far is the journey from here to a star? And if I ever lost you, how much would I cry? How deep is the ocean? How high is the sky? How far would I travel to be where you are? How far is the journey from here to a star? And if I ever lost you, how much would I cry? How deep is the ocean? How high is the
thank you for those beautiful musical questions. We're lucky. I don't know how I follow up on those two things. As we continue our search for answers this week with Reverend Hannah, an old saying kept surfacing in my mind. Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. I don't know why, but it was there. But I decided to focus on curiosity and not cats. Curiosity, our drive to fill a gap in our knowledge, to explore, to investigate, to learn something new. I found it is a fundamental trait, but one that varies greatly in each of us by degrees. The degree to which we are willing or able to express our curiosity may be hampered by barriers, one of those being fear. Fear that I may ask a dumb question, be embarrassed by demonstrating I don't know something that others do. I may fear asking the question because I don't really want to know the answer, or I fear the answer. Or I fear that the answer may be too complex for me to understand, so I don't ask. One of the examples that people often hold up, and I'm sorry, I think it's part of ageism, is new technology. I hesitate to ask some questions because I don't know if I'll be able to comprehend or actually utilize so much of the new information. I found that not necessarily to be true, but I'm also concerned that I'll be judged to be clueless or contribute to the stereotype that old dogs can't learn new tricks. Another barrier to our curiosity is our inclination to make and go with our own assumptions. We assume a lot. I don't ask because I already know. One of my fallback behaviors when I am in a new group is to assume that everyone else there is either more qualified or more knowledgeable about the topics than I am. It prevents me from speaking up, at least initially. I don't ask questions, I wait and see. This limits my participation, though, and delays making connections. I have learned that. I may not want to ask questions or search for new information because some of what I know and believe to be true may actually be incorrect. Am I willing to accept new truths or changes in information? Think about how rapidly information changes. Then I may have to adjust my own behaviors. There is so much truth in Maya Angelou's, when we know better, we do better. Perhaps we are limited in our curiosity because we learned it was not okay to ask questions in our environments as children, at home and at school. Children can be famous for asking unending questions that may be amusing, but also wearing on the adults in their lives. But nurturing this in our children requires patience and a recognition of curiosity as the important trait it is. The importance of this was explored in an article called 6 Surprising Benefits of Curiosity by an organization that I just discovered called the Greater Good Science Center in Berkeley, California. The writer expresses that the more curious people are actually happier. They tend to have more depth and positivity in their relationships. They experience a more expansive worldview. They possess more empathy for others and a willingness to try new things. I also discovered, this was interesting, that dopamine and other feel-good chemicals are actually released when we encounter stimulus that is unfamiliar and hold unanswered questions. This decreases our anxiety and increases our sense of well-being. We have to be open to it. The urge to explore and seek novelty helps us to remain vigilant and gain knowledge about our constantly changing environment. Since the mind is like a muscle, which becomes stronger through continual exercise, the mental exercise of curiosity makes us stronger, more observant, and actually teaches us to anticipate new ideas. So, what are some of the best ways to practice our curiosity? Read, follow your own interests, relish new information, browse a physical bookstore or library, ask questions and follow-up questions, sit with the unanswered. And one of the favorites that I found says, polish your mind with the minds of others. That suggested to me those deep and incredibly satisfying conversations with others. I love experiencing them in person. So, arouse, awake, excite, fuel, pique, provoke, stir, and spark. We will all be better for it.
Thank you, Beth. Beth, if you and I ever start a band, we're going to be called Dopamine and Other Feel-Good Chemicals. I think it's a good band name. I like it. So I will obviously not get to all of your questions. I have a veritable deck of cards here, but I'm going to do my best to answer a variety of questions to get at the breadth of what you all are looking to know. So I'll start with this one. Which UU principle do you find most difficult to live? And this answer is easy because the answer is the first principle. It's the first principle, right? The idea that every person has inherent worth and dignity, which is difficult because I don't have to like people for them to have inherent worth and dignity. I don't have to agree with them for them to have inherent worth and dignity. I can judge their life choices all I want. But because when it comes down to it, I am not actually the one conferring anyone's inherent worth and dignity. That's the thing about that inherent part, is that people have worth and dignity by virtue of being people, and that nothing I can do, nothing they can do, nothing any of us can do can take that away. And as a universalist who's comfortable with God language, the way that I sometimes think about this in a sort of pithy way is that, thank goodness God loves everyone because I can't. And it's a reminder that I don't have to love every single human being on this earth. That's not my job. My job is to move and be and do in ways that acknowledges, right? I'm not conferring people's inherent worth and dignity with the way I move and live in the world. I'm acknowledging that they have it. But that involves acknowledging that we are limited human beings, which is not always Unitarian Universalism's strong suit. I also once wrote a blog post about how going to Costco on a Saturday morning makes me struggle with the first principle. Right, I'm like, the world is full of evil, but have you ever been to a big box store on a Saturday morning? Many are leaving organized religion. How can we prevent this for the fellowship? And the short answer is that we cannot prevent this. Not in the sense that we should just watch people go out the door and not do anything about it, but in the sense that, this individual fellowship is not entirely in control of broad societal trends. Instead, we are subject to broad societal trends. They happen around us. They're the water we swim in. And so it's not that we can, be the exception to the rule. Unitarian Universalists love to be exceptional. Yeah, we love it. And so we think that somehow if we will just figure out how to be the exception to the rule instead of figuring out how we live in a world where that's the new reality. And so I think my reframe on this question is, how are we going to live in the new reality where people being members of an organized religion is no longer the default? And where the people who come in our doors are less and less often people who are coming out of other traditions because they were dissatisfied or wounded by the spirituality and theology that they grew up with, but rather people who are hungry for something deeper and something more because they were raised without any of it. And so for me, the way that we respond to that societal trend is to double down on the things that make us a religious community. And if religious is one of your word allergies, take a deep breath. Right, that one of the roots of the word religious is that it's about binding together. Because that's one of the things that makes us different than people who are just sort of on a personal spiritual path without any community holding them accountable. And that when I think about what we can offer in Unitarian Universalism, it is space for that distinct and individual spiritual journey coupled with the depth and rigor and accountability that comes with doing it together, doing it with other people, committing to learn from other people, to encounter the divine in other people. And if you think that encountering the divine in other people is not rigorous, please see my previous answer about the first principle. Right? That depth and authenticity that religious community can offer cannot be mimicked. There are cheap imitators out there, but you can't mimic it. You can't approximate it somewhere else. And so when we focus on those things, that's right, and do it authentically. Don't try to jazz it up just because we think it ought to be jazzed up, right? It's like the joke about evangelical churches and smoke machines and stuff like that, right? People don't actually care about smoke machines. What they care about are the people leading worship, whether they are lay people or clergy, are they authentic? Are the people leading the congregation, whether staff or volunteer, are they leading from the fullness of themselves? Can I see myself here? Will I be held in community here? That's what matters. What is the tattoo on your arm? Do a little show and tell. You probably can't read it from where you are unless you brought your binoculars, so I will read it to you. It's from a longer meditation by the Unitarian Universalist minister Elizabeth Tarbox, who served much of her ministry on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and so her meditations and poetry and prose are full of shore imagery. It says, "Come to where the ocean touches the shore. Find me in the bright light promise of morning on the waves. Look carefully at the bubbles breaking on the wet sand. There I am." You would think that it's literally on my arm. I look at it every day of my life, that I would know it by heart. And it's from a reading that I did at my brother's memorial service. And so that felt sufficient to be inscribed upon my skin. How would you describe your personal spiritual beliefs? Which, right, like, that's a big, broad, I don't want to hold you here all day in a sort of sermon/hostage situation. So we'll talk about, right, that when I think about truth, right, religious truth, I sort of distinguish between that there is truth that we are all seeking. But then there are some things that I think of and call capital T truths, things that feel eternal to me. And so here are sort of two of my capital T truths. One is that you are whole and wholly beloved, just as you are, and you could use a little work. And that you can put any pronoun in there, right? I am whole and wholly beloved, just as I am, and I could use a little work. We are whole and wholly beloved, just as we are. We could use a little work. And the second capital T truth that is at the core of the theology that frames my ministry and my life is that all of us need all of us to survive. Which is a more poetic and accessible way to say, I believe in universal salvation. Right? But that salvation is collective, right? Wow, and I feel if salvation is a word that makes you go, ooh, take a deep breath with me, let it out, and know that whatever horrific thing you're thinking about with the word salvation is probably not what I mean when I say it. Right? But that all of us need all of us to survive, to thrive, and that if any one of us is not surviving, is not thriving, then none of us is surviving or thriving. We get there together. So, each of us and all of us together is whole and wholly beloved just as we are, and we could use a little work. And all of us need all of us, yes, even that person, to survive. Favorite nonfiction, I think this says non-religious author/book, and then it lists like a couple of other things that I could describe my favorite non-religious one of, and or nonfiction non-religious. And I would say to that, or maybe, is that or religious? Gosh, the point is, a minister can make anything religious, so look out. I'm sure if you would like a list of things that were not in purposefully religious that I have made religious, I'm sure you could talk to my wife. It's just like, everything we do is not looking for a sermon illustration, Hannah. Like, we did not go to this movie so you could work at it. But it happened. Non-fiction, non-religious, okay. Author or nonfiction, non-religious author or book. Who, like, gosh, this is what I'll say. I'm gonna not answer this question, but I'm gonna tell you books that I love to read. So the truth is that I mostly read nonfiction for work. I rarely read nonfiction that's not for my work, because everything is a sermon illustration. But the favorite fiction that I read that's definitely not for work is that I love cozy mysteries. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with what cozy mysteries are it's like the Lifetime original movie of books. Right? It's about like a woman who owns a knitting store, and she and all of her knitting friends get together and drink a lot of Pinot Grigio, and somehow in this tiny seaside town, there's like grisly murders on a regular basis, and she and all of her knitting buddies solve grisly murders. Those. I love cozy mysteries and read them all the time, and so that is a non-answer to this question, but it's something you should know about me, is that I love cozy mysteries. This card just says afterlife with 2 question marks, which I feel no need to elaborate, because this is also how I feel about the afterlife. Afterlife? 2 question marks. How do you pronounce your last name? It's Villnave, which once when a colleague was using a reading of something I had written to read in worship, and so I get this question a lot from colleagues who use stuff. They're like, how do you pronounce your last name? I want to give you proper credit. And once I said, yeah, it rhymes with Bill Cave. And I was like, and then I followed it up with, imagine, if you will, the most boring, most anglicized pronunciation of these letters that you can. That's the one. It's Villnave. This is a checkbox question, which I love a drop-down list. I will mark it. Do you like chocolate? Dark milk, white, none. And so I will check the top 3 boxes. It says playful question on the back. Thank you for labeling it. That's lovely. What about being you resonates most for you? And I'll say, right, sometimes these questions are actually the hardest for me. I grew up Unitarian Universalist. My mother grew up Unitarian Universalist. The family joke is that my grandfather joined the UU Fellowship after being raised by a British-descended Anglican father and an Irish Catholic mother who only ever fought about religion. And so he joined the Unitarian Society in New Brunswick, New Jersey in the 60s. And so sometimes I struggle to articulate what it is about Unitarian Universalism that keeps me coming back, because it sort of feels inevitable. When people ask me the question, right, there's sort of a standard interview question in minister land about, like, how are you going to grapple with the diversity of belief in our religious organization? And I am always tripped up by that question because I legitimately don't know how to do it any other way. Right, the church of my childhood had a similar theological split, I imagine, to this one, as it does to most UU congregations, where there's UU Buddhists and atheists and people who are sort of have a Christian flavor to their Unitarian Universalism, and then most of us who are just sort of in the middle, figuring it out. And so what resonates about it for me is that we are a living tradition. And the tension and the contradiction and the possibility that happens when you put those two words together, because it doesn't just mean that you inherit a tradition that you're just supposed to keep the same over the course of your lifetime and hand it off to the next generation exactly as it was handed to you. That's not what being Unitarian Universalist means. In fact, if we hand off, whether it's an individual congregation or a wider faith, if we hand it off in the exact condition it was handed to us, we have failed. A living tradition means that we have to shape it with our experiences, both ones that we bring already in and as we live. Right? Unitarian Universalism will change in response to the people in the pews. And that's not to say that there's nothing eternal or nothing foundational that remains unchanged, but that if nothing changes, and I don't just mean like we change the curtains, right? Not just the window dressing stuff that changes, but if nothing changes about how we are as a community in response to the reality of the people in our pews, then we have failed to be Unitarian Universalists. And that is daunting and enlivening. Sorry, I'm experiencing buyer's remorse about my own order of these questions, so here I go. What have you missed most about Wisconsin/the Midwest? So this question presumes that you know a piece of information that maybe you don't, which is that I grew up in Racine, Wisconsin. I lived there until I was 18, and then the sort of peripatetic route I've taken around life since then. It took me to Tempe, Arizona, Baltimore, Maryland, Annapolis, Maryland, and Cheyenne, Wyoming. I have lived in both humid and dry places, and I will say, what have I not missed? Humidity. And mosquitoes. Why? There's a question in here that I'm going to get to in a moment about the sources of our suffering, and I'm now realizing that I should have just answered mosquitoes. So what have I missed most about Wisconsin and the Midwest? And one thing is my family, being close to them, having kids, and my own parents aging means that all of that distance starts to feel a lot more distant. I have missed, and this is not a thing that I missed while I was in Wyoming, because Wyoming shares this value, which is just a lack of pretension. Right? That we are who we are. We are showing up as we are to do the good work and to do it together, and that we don't have to be all fancy about it. We can just do it without a lot of huffing and puffing. And that, though I'm sure all of you are thinking, you're like, I think of some huffers and puffers and in the Midwest, but what I like about these sorts of communities in Wisconsin and the Midwest is that there is not a lot of huffing and puffing, and I've missed that. What is one of the biggest challenges life has brought you? And where's that? Okay, I'm going to pair this with what is the foundational or main source of suffering, which I think is the sort of a slightly more thoughtful way to kind of ask the question that lots of us ask, which is, why do bad things happen? So when I told you about my tattoo, I told you that I read it at my brother's memorial service in, God, I don't know how time works anymore. In 2010, my brother, who was a few years older than I am, was diagnosed with an astrocytoma brain tumor. He had emergency surgery and then lived with it for about 6 or so years. It came back as glioblastoma, and he died in 2016. And so when I think about why do bad things happen? I reject all theology that suggests that it has anything to do with anyone's negative thoughts, that it has anything to do with the actions we have or haven't taken, that there is some degree of just random chance. Cells divide in ways they're not supposed to. It's a feature of being alive. It's a terrible feature of being alive, but it is one. Right? Terrible things happen. And I think that, for me, the source of suffering is when we choose to make terrible things happen, rather than the random terrible things that are just part of life. Right? That the source of suffering happens when we choose disconnection, when we choose to not acknowledge the ways we're intertwined, when we choose those things. That's when, for me, that is real suffering. And one of the biggest challenges life has brought me is that real grief, when you look it in the face, when you stare down the reality of the fact that as Unitarian Universalists, right, our most common answer to the question about the afterlife is afterlife, right? When you really stare that down, when it's someone you love, that is difficult. It's heart-wrenching. You can't really answer a question that you'd want desperately to answer. And to acknowledge our own human limitation and uncertainty when all we want is some macaroni and cheese theology to comfort us And we're left with a question, and I think it's the right question to be left with, but God, that is hard. So I'll answer one more question, which is, what does your world revolve around? And the short and simple answer is my family. That my world revolves around my 2 kids, Ada and Benjamin. Sometimes I feel like I wish it didn't revolve around somebody who has the brain of a 3.5-year-old, because that is its own sort of suffering and pain. But it revolves around my family and around the life that we're trying to build together, and that the shape of my ministry has changed to support revolving around that. And that I would be a minister in that revolving, whether or not I held a congregational position. And so it revolves around my family, and that the expression of my ministry here supports that and honors that. And I would invite that your lay ministry should support you having your world revolve around that which is most precious to you. And if it ever feels like it doesn't, then we should talk. Because if your work here at the fellowship is soul-sucking rather than life-giving, I want to talk. I want to make it better together. And there are many, 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 many more questions that I think I have already gone over time. So I will stop, but I'm grateful. And we're going to sing more questions. Oh, look, Christina told me what time she added into the script what time I should stop, and I have ignored that completely. So we're going to sing instead.
So let's sing the question that we didn't get answered today. Where do we come from? So you won't really need the lyrics on the slide. This half of the room, you're going to learn this song with me, and then this half, we're going to learn the other part of the song. And we're going to put it together. And if you feel like being fancy, in the teal hymnal 1003, there's some other lines as well. So if you like standing, you can go ahead. And this side, I'm going to sing it, and then you just loop in with me. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Again. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we? One more time. Where do we come from? What are we? What are we? And we're going to stop there. All right, you got that in your ear? You got that? This half of the group is going to go, mystery, mystery. Life is a middle and a mystery. Again, mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. One more time. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Okay, so group one's going to start. Reverend Hannah's going to bring group 2 in, and then we'll be a choir. Here we go. Group 1. 1, 2, 3, go. Where do we come from? What are we? What are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? What are we going? Here we go. And
together is coming to a close, which means our time to return to the world, such as it is, and to our daily lives is beginning. Remember that there are always ways to get connected here, online too, to live our faith fully. Be sure to read the weekly Scroll e-newsletter, or let us know if you want to be added to the mailing list. Check the order of service for some highlights about stuff that's coming up. I invite you now to consider something from today's service that you want to carry away from this gathering into your week. A phrase, a topic, a song, a question that you would have answered differently, because that is the blessing of Unitarian Universalism. It is our hope that what you carry with you will provide inspiration and empowerment until we are together again. And so now, please join me in our unison words for extinguishing our chalice flame, even as we continue to hold its warmth and light in our hearts. As we extinguish this flame, let us go our way with hope in our hearts, with our spirits renewed, and with a deeper understanding of life's mystery. Let us carry the light of compassion and commitment to build a better world. And with that, go in questions, in curiosity, in wonder, and in that gut intuition that tells you there's something more happening there. Go in peace, knowing we wait to embrace you upon your return.